My name is Sebastian Labelle. I'm the Festival Director for Mayworks Halifax. It's my great pleasure to welcome you all to the 10th anniversary edition of the Mayworks Halifax Festival of Working People and the Arts. Our festival, of course, takes place in Mi'kma'ki, the unceded, unsurrendered territory of the Mi'kmaq people. This is a fact affirmed in Section 35 of the Canadian Constitution, which itself recognizes all treaties signed with Indigenous peoples, including the peace and friendship treaties signed here between the British Crown, the Mi'kmaq people, and the Wolastoqiyik people. For those of you who may not know, Mayworks Halifax is an annual festival which celebrates International Workers' Day, or May Day, which is marked on May 1st, and we do that through a full program of cultural events that usually span about 2 weeks, but this year, because of our 10th anniversary, we've got a program of events that spans the entire month of May, even into...
I am just so pleased and happy and proud of the support. When I first decided I would do this, I thought, will anybody be interested? But yeah, you are! This is the Sisters in Action Black Feminist Panel. And I was going to do a recognition to Mi'kma'ki, but I don't have to do that. Seb already did that, so that's good. But I want to, I'm just aghast, I really am. And I'm not usually lost for words. That's true. No, I'm with you. But at this time, before we begin, I just have a couple words to say. When I first thought of this, I felt that it was important to bring stories from Black women in our community that have worked so hard in the feminist movement. And I know, because I've seen them, I've witnessed it. Sister Lynn Jones, Sister Delvina, Sister Carolanne Wright, and Sister Elle, who's the future of feminism. So we're doing really well, you know, in terms of representing. I'm feeling very good about passing the torch on to Elle. And we had one sister who could not be here tonight, Dolly Williams. She had a death in her family, so she couldn't make it, but she had planned to be here as well to tell stories from the Prestons. But again, I thank you all for coming. I really wish I had a whole bunch of money. I'd give you. But I want to, at this moment, before we begin, thank my sponsors and our sponsors, the Charles Taylor Theatre Media Arts Association, which is the not-for-profit that I partner with. Also, Unifor. Unifor is here, strong. Would all the Unifor representatives please stand up? No, oh, come on. And the Nova Scotia Advisory Council on the Status of Women. So because of them, I'll be able to document this, and this is what I really wanted to do. I think it's important for these stories to be told. And lastly, what did I want to say? I want to thank Bus Stop Theatre. Seb is so amazing. Every idea I bring to him, he just kind of says, okay, Shell, and he lets me go ahead. And I think this is the third time I've produced something in the Bus Stop Theatre, but I love this space. And all of you know that the space really needs the support of the community. So please, on behalf of the Bus Stop Theatre, write your MLA, write your MP, let them know that you want this space kept. I could not do this, what I do in Neptune. I could not do this anywhere else. Because of Seb's community support, I can do what I do. So Afua is going to share some of her wonderful stories and wisdom with us. Dr. Afua Cooper is Halifax's current poet laureate. She has published 5 books of poetry, including the critically acclaimed Copper Woman and Other Poems, and 2 historical novels. Her creative work has been recognized with national and international awards. In 2018, Prime Minister Justin Trudeau recognized Dr. Cooper as one of the women who are changing Canadian society for the better. Cooper is also the 3rd James Robinson Johnston Chair in Black Canadian Studies at Dalhousie University, an academic leader. She is the founder of the Black Canadian Studies Association and also created the Black and African Diaspora Studies minor at Dalhousie, making it the first of its kind in a Canadian institution of higher learning. And she is a beautiful spirit who is always thinking about her community. And so at this time, I'd like to present Dr. Afua.
Thank you, Shelley. Thanks to all of you who are here. To Ayoka, I'm going to bring the mic up. Thank you. And to my panel, to the panel. Congratulations. It's Mayworks, and we think of workers, laborers. So my contribution is to the enslaved workers, African people who were enslaved for 400 years in these hemispheres and not given 1 cent when so-called emancipation came. One federal minister was talking about the importance of having women participate fully in the labor force, and also the fact that women earn 88 cents on the dollar that a man earns. But when you break that down, black women earn 75 cents on the dollar if she's employed. And there's this whole thing about getting women to participate more in the workforce, because they say it's a $12 trillion economy, and so women would, get that part of that $12 trillion pot. But then I thought, black women shouldn't even be working at all. Like, we should be paid. When you think, so it's, this whole thing about innovation and entrepreneuring and the whole capitalist spin on it. There's still 400 years of debt for which we have not been paid. And I want people to think about that, because it is critical, and we can't go forward in terms of truth and justice and peace and justice if Western societies, including Canada, don't deal with that. And I also want to acknowledge Africa, because when we do these things, sometimes we even do Black History Month and we don't acknowledge Africa. It is from Africa that all these people were stolen, all these children, all these women, men. One historian who did the math, and there are lots of economists who are doing the math, and saying if enslaved people and their descendants were to be paid, it probably would bankrupt Western economies, because we're owed so much. So I wanna recognize Africa, because Africa is not recognized. You now have idiots like Emmanuel Macron, who is still using the discourse of eugenics, who is talking about African women are still having too many children, and it's a civilizational problem. In 2019, that discourse is still normalized as civilizational problem, when France has stolen so much from Africa. And had it not been for Africa, France would be down in the gutters, because African colonies still pay, or former colonies still pay France l'impôt colonial, the colonial tax in 2019, right? So Europe is criminal, and I want to recognize Africa for the theft that has been done on her children stolen, and no one to recognize that. So this poem is called Peggy Pompadour. Peggy Pompadour was an enslaved woman who was owned by colonial administrator Peter Russell of Upper Canada, which is Ontario. And Peggy was in the habit of running away, as they say. And eventually Peter Russell put her up for sale with her son Jupiter. And he tried to sell her to another colonial man by the name of Matthew Elliott, who was a large slaveholder in the Windsor area of Ontario. And he also tried to sell her to Joseph Grant of Ontario. And some of you may know Joseph Grant as a Mohawk chief in Ontario. But he was also part of the Upper Canadian colonial elite. And so what I gleaned from Peter Russell's sister, her name is Elizabeth Russell, she kept a diary and talking about Peggy and so on. And so I put my own poetic spin on it. And there is the ad that Peter Russell put in the newspaper, which I have used as part of the poem. So I also want to say Assalamu alaikum to everyone who is fasting. I'm fasting and I am using all my energy here before we break the fast around 8:45. Elizabeth Russell speaks of her slave Peggy Pompadour. So it's Elizabeth Russell's voice. Peggy is in the habit of running away. It would be bad enough if she left by herself, but now she's taking her children with her. She is a very bad woman, a mean slave. She goes to the outskirts of the city and roams in the bushes, eating berries and wading in the Don River, catching trout that still travel to these parts. She has erected a hut of sorts from the brambles of the elderberry tree. She lived there with Amy and Millie, her daughters, for 3 weeks until Peter sent the constables to retrieve her. He returned the children to the house but lodged Peggy in jail. Now he wants to sell her, but neither Joseph Grant nor Matthew Elliott wants to buy her, though they had promised Peter they would. It is on account of her fugitive career. Because no one wants to buy her, Peter has to keep her in jail. He resents paying the jailer's fee. If only that mean slave would behave. Her so-called husband, Pompey, visits her each day. He takes her food and a blanket. He brings her ginger tea. He claims that even though it is summer, it is still cold in the jail. Once Pompey even snatched the children from the house to visit her. Pompey is a free man, otherwise we would jail him too. Peggy's incorrigible son Jupiter has followed in her fugitive steps. He has just run off. Someone saw him in the vicinity of the Don, lurking around Pottery Road, lurking about Mr. Long's farm. Peter has sent the constables after him. Peter really wishes to be rid of Peggy. I, for one, do not ever want her to set foot in this house again. I hate the very sight of her, since she smashed the fine china I crossed the sea with from Ireland. Because the jailer's fee is mounting, Peter is forced to put an ad in the paper. To be sold, a black woman named Peggy, aged about 40 years, and a black boy, her son, named Jupiter, aged about 15 years, both of them the property of the subscriber. The woman is a tolerable cook and washerwoman and perfectly understands making soaps and candles. The boy is tall and strong for his age and has been employed in the country business, but brought up principally equally as a house servant. They are each of them servants for life. In other words, slaves. York, February 10, 1806, signed Peter Russell. Matthew Elliot has disappointed us. Joseph Brant the same. Perhaps someone else will take pity on Peter and take the wretch and her son off his hand. I have already gifted my goddaughter, Elizabeth Denison, with Peggy's daughters, Amy and Millie. This poem is about Carnival in Fort-de-France, which is in Martinique. That I was on the island of Martinique in 2016, and Carnival, I arrived at the same time Carnival was going on. So it was just really, really nice. It was like a sound island. The colors, the music, and one of the things they have is the Rara band. And Rara came from Haiti. It's music, it's dance, it's making of fabric, art, everything. And they had all these Rara bands in Fort-de-France. So then my mind took flight and I thought, okay, who are these people? Who are these people? You know, ancestors coming back. What is this I hear? 1,000 drums playing, rat-a-tat, 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 tat-tat, and Max Roach conducting, rat-a-tam-tam-tam, rat-a-tam-tam-tam, trap drums, djembes, and congos, and the voices of 100 archangels chanting into the wind. Rara, rara, the drums scream the names of Dahomey. But this is Fort-de-France. Dahomey is on the other side of the ocean. What is this I hear? Rara drums awaken in the city. A dog howls, a dog scowls. I look through the window. He dives into the sea and disappears while swimming to the other side of the harbor. A cock, its circadian clock, recalibrated, crows at 15 minutes to midday. Rara rhythms have remade the world. But this is not Haiti. How come these Rara people are marching all over Fort-de-France, sending vibrations into the earth, the air, the sky, answering secret rhythms with sacred rhythms? I am sure they are not mortal beings, but a celestial horde on the march with Babatunde Olatunji. The sound of trap drums, sa-sa-ye, up into the hills, to Didier, Montartanson, Trenel, even up to the Balata Road, way past Tivoli, to the volcano named Montpellier, and from the peak of the hill, the drummers and the trumpeters look down onto the harbor, look way past the horizon, and beat their thoughts onto the air, sending back the colonizer and Indian killer Desnambuc to the deepest dungeon of France, recrowning Châteauyer, black carried warrior, beating the martial rhythms for triumphant Kalinaga warriors, reversing the slave trade, stitching whole again Africa. And in the distance, from the direction of Lamentin, I hear the pounding of hooves. Doom, 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 doom. The earth trembles in unexpected bliss. I see clouds of brown dust spiraling up to the sky. I feel the hot breath of panting steeds rushing toward Fort-de-France. Somewhere there is a clash of cymbals. A gate opens. Mounted men holding a landscape of Osafa flags rush through. Sparks of fire rise from the horses' hooves. What is this? The cavalry, led by the fugitive slave named Matthew Leveillé? From the savannah, the drummers advance, beating on 1,000 on drums, beating on horns and trumpets, bamboo sticks, shak, 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 not made by human hands. African slaves chained at the bottom of the ship, drowned in the shipwreck at Anskafar. Whoa! And from way up north, I hear them weeping, wailing, and gnashing their teeth, a fury of chains clanking as the ship crashed on the rocks and sank to the bottom of the sea. Somber ghosts stand on the beach, look across the ocean. Take us back to Benin, take us back to Benin. Now they walk across the landscape at Diamond Rock, beating their chests and chanting a salt water dirge. Oh, meanwhile, across the world, in Tromlan, a sandspit in the Indian Ocean, Anskafar repeats itself, but a child named Moses, is saved from the water, and he is placed on a raft. Somehow, guided by ocean currents, he will find his way to Fort de France and pay the seeds of his destiny. Rara from Dahomey, Rara from Haiti, Rara in Fort de France, Rara blowing onto the Caribbean Sea towards St. Lucie and La Dominique, way up to Les Îles de Vierge and down to the tip of Venezuela, creating this archipelago of rhythms. And then a boy, 14 years old, pierces the air with the fury from his trumpet, and suddenly the Taino Cacique, Bohichio, stirs from his sleep, rubs his eyes, grabs his conch shell, and blows a message to Hatui in Cuba, and back to Haiti, to Louverture, Desailly, Christophe, Cécile, Fatima, and Hurricane blows his breath across the sea, and we say, Hurricane a come, Hurricane a come, Hurricane a come, oh no better, run. And meanwhile, Ana Caona, Taino Empress of Hispaniola, stands on the tallest point of Haiti, and whirlwinds this final dance for independence. Ra ra, ra ra, ra ra, ra ra, to ra.
I'd like to introduce our moderator for the evening. I don't think she really needs any introduction because we all know her and love her. But I am going to say a few words, and she only gave me like a paragraph. Well, I don't even think it's a paragraph, 3 lines. But shows you how humble and wonderful she is. Elle Jones is a poet, educator, journalist, and advocate. She was the 5th Poet Laureate of Halifax and currently holds the 15th Nancy's Chair in Women's Studies at Mount St. Vincent University. Elle is a 2016 recipient of the Nova Scotia Human Rights Commission Burnley Rocky Jones Award. Elle is a co-founder of the Black Power Hour, a radio show developed collectively with prisoners, and it's really beautiful and interesting. If you ever get an opportunity, please tune in. Her advocacy and work fights anti-Black racism in Canada, walking in the path of our great-grandmothers who resisted relentlessly. And so that's all she wrote about herself. So everyone, Elle Jones.
We need to give a big round of applause to Shelley, not just for putting this together, but for how humbly and beautifully, and you're just always there with your beautiful spirit and your big smile, and we're just so grateful for you. I want to try and leave time for questions. questions, so I'm going to try and keep these opening remarks short, non-academic style, short. But there's a couple of things I want to say just to set us up for this panel. The first thing I'll say is I made a little face when Shelley said that I was the future of black feminism. That wasn't an anti-Shelley face. It was just that I very firmly believe that the future of black feminism, one, exists in our babies and the very young people coming up, but also because I believe the future of black feminism must be in our kitchens and on our corners and our prison cells and on the streets and in our communities. It can't be in either one person or, so that was why I made that face. So just so you know, so you laughed at me. But it's actually an important point as we move forward tonight, because we're asking this question about what is black feminism and what is the black feminist struggle. And that's not always an easy question. Many black women don't identify as feminists, for example, because of all the problems of white Western feminism. Black women haven't felt included in feminism. The word feminism doesn't seem to apply to black women who have never been allowed to be part of the feminine or womanhood. So there's been various responses to that, obviously, through the history of black feminist thought. There's also obviously debates about, where does our advocacy go? Is it still feminist advocacy if we're advocating women, right? Like those kind of questions. So I don't know if we're going to get answers to that tonight, but those questions of what it looks like to be a black woman in society and what it looks like more specifically to be a black feminist in society are going to be in the stories and experiences tonight. I just want to highlight quickly two events that I think frame this event for me. So of course everybody's aware that Viola Desmond was placed onto the $10 bill, and so this caused in Canada a sudden recognition of black women, but only one black woman, right? That's all we get. They're like, okay, now let's just put Viola on everything because we don't know about any other black women. So as much as that acknowledge something important about this province and about our community of black women in Nova Scotia that we can't obviously disregard, I do think it's also important that that project has to lead to us saying, if we didn't know this story, what other stories don't we know? What other people were in community with Viola? Because surely she didn't exist alone, so who are those women? And what other women have existed in this community whose stories we don't know? So I think that $10 bill, as much as it's a celebration, a very important celebration for African Nova Scotian women, has to motivate us to find stories like we're going to hear tonight about all the rest of the women in our communities. And the second event was, of course, the funeral of Joan Jones. And I think that was a very profound moment for many of us because of how little we knew about Joan's life, especially compared to Rocky's life. And of course, I dearly loved Rocky. That's, again, not a criticism, but how is it that we knew so much about Rocky and his funeral was so large, and then here's Joan, and people really were like, oh, like what? We know she did stuff, but what was it? So that shows us how much our black women who have been leaders and nurturers, and I think many of those men would be the first to say that without black women, they would have done nothing and been nothing. They couldn't have done what they did, but we still don't know those stories. So I think that extra motivates us tonight to find out about the stories of women that were organizing during this time. The last thing I'll say is that there's so many black women in this audience that deserve recognition, but I don't want to name people because when you do that, my mother warns me not to do that, because then you forget a name and then that person's like, why is she being so salty? So I don't want to name people and they think I intentionally disregarded them, but I see so many faces tonight of women that are doing so much in their communities all over the place, so I want to pay recognition. So I'll stop there. I think I've given some framing for what we're doing tonight. Normally I'm stingy with bios, my own and others, and I skip over a lot, but I'm actually going to read them tonight because I think embedded in these bios is a lot of information, for example, that I didn't know. So in the interest of just showing us what black women have been up to, I'm going to read these long bios. Like, not just be like, oh, whatever, just read yourself. So first is Carolanne Wright. Carolanne is the Director of Business and Labour Market Development, African Nova Scotian Communities for the Halifax Partnership. She has been in the organization since 2006. Carolanne was born in Beachville, Nova Scotia, to Viola Harris and Clarence Wright. Carolanne is the eldest of 8 siblings and mother of 3 sons. She can connect her family line to both the black refugees and black loyalists. Carolanne has over 30 years experience in training in the field of community development, project management, organizational board governance, facilitation and mediation, and she's worked in Toronto, South Africa, and Halifax, and more recently in Ghana. During her time in Toronto, she ran for mayor in 1988, placing second, which is better than Faith Goldie, the Nazi did, highlighting issues of poverty, race, and injustice. She is also a founding staff member of the Holistic Women's Health Centre in Toronto called Women's Health and Women's Hands. She's taught courses on community development and diversity at NSDC and then the former Henson College. She served on the board of the National Action Committee on the Status of Women from 1990 to 94. And in Halifax, she served on many organizations and committees, such as the chair of the Black Community Work Group, Black History Month Committee. Presently, she's a member of the Nova Scotia Mass Choir. She sits on the Beachville Lakeside Timberlea Centre Development Committee and is the head coach for 12 and under girls for the Metro Elite Girls Basketball.
Good evening, everyone. Can everyone hear me? Yes. Okay, good. So, there was actually a fight here who was going to go first, so you can tell where the feminism lies in this line. And I'm really honored to be here with my sisters, and I love Shelley to death, and I have to say that without embarrassment. She has just been, you know, she's just an incredible organizer. And actually, Joan and I used to joke about, you know, Shelley could meet the devil at the border in she is always so pleasant no matter what the issues are. We've been in some tense situations together. And I have to say this about Shelley, when the occupation on Goddington Street years ago, when we occupied the employment center for 122 days, I think it was Lynn, right? And Shelley was the person that went into the office and she smiled and she sucked them right in. They had no idea. And she got pamphlets, and then we all came in behind her, and she's a perfect decoy because nobody suspects her. But love you and thank you, and to my sisters on the panel, it's an honor to be here. The issue of Black feminism is one that has actually been woven throughout my life without me actually declaring, yes, I'm a Black feminist. It's something that is infused in you, you are or you aren't. And I have been really fortunate to be able to grow up in a Black community and see women in various situations and be able to honor all of that. You know, it was, particularly in Black communities, what people do and what they don't do is not valued or devalued. We appreciate all women. I do remember, and I always give credit to this when somebody mentions leadership issues and that, you know, how did you get them and where did they come from? And I always credit my family first. And I also credit the church, whatever you think about that. Our churches, particularly in Black communities, provided opportunities for leadership. And that's from community to community, because as a child growing up, my grandmother took me to all the Black churches throughout the community. And I always used to be just in awe of the women that used to get up on the podium and speak like the ministers. And I used to think, I can't wait. And I was extremely shy, so still am. Nobody believes that. But the reality is, when I saw those women get up and take the podium and be able to speak, and people like Carolanne Thomas and Afua Cooper, Carolanne Oliver in our community, Marie Hamilton, those folks were really, you looked at as a young woman, these are the people that you aspire to be like and be able to articulate your issues. So, and I joke about this too, but as being the eldest of 8 and having 5 brothers, there's some feminism that has to come out there, because you have got to be able to manage 5 brothers who are rough. And they tease me to this day because they used to say, you were mean, you were just really rough with us. I said, I had to make an example of somebody to keep the rest of you in line. So, as an eldest sibling, one of the things around leadership and taking your role in the household was very important, and that's where those leadership skills come from on a personal basis. I was also fortunate enough to be in the company in my teenage years of Joan and Rocky and seeing how that leadership issue worked. And for me, it was very influential. And I think Augustul, their son, pointed on another panel and said, nobody told you what to do, but you just, by example, looked at them and saw how they worked together. And that was enough an example. And that was really important to me. And to have an opinion, because Joan certainly did have one. And she let you know it, whether you asked her for it or not. So my other example was, you know, when we were in TYP, one of the things we learned about was Black activism and leadership. And reading a book on the Black Panthers, it was astounding to me that Angela Davis pointed out the issues that were going on, how important they were, but some of the sexism they experienced within the movement. And for me, that was a really poignant thing for her to point out and talk about, knowing that those issues actually existed. So So it's not new, is my point in talking about that, even within our own movement. My experiences in Toronto are many, so we don't have time. I think I have another. I'm good? Yes. So my experiences with the movement, I spent 15 years in Toronto working and living, and my son's up there in the back of the room. Hi, Sean. I have to acknowledge my baby who comes to support his mom. That was the on-the-ground experience. I met people like Sister Afua Cooper there, who was always involved in organizing, one people on the street, and I think she was on the university at that particular time, and ran into people like the Black Women's Caucus, a powerful group. I don't want to begin to name names, but those people were influential in terms of recognizing what it meant to be a Black woman during times when things were very serious in Toronto. And it's one of those things that is very sobering, because when I hear about the streets checks issue here and what's happening, I think of those times in Toronto in the 80s and early 90s when we were going through that, when young Black men were getting shot in the back, and we were talking about that very same issue. So for me, it's bittersweet, it's hard, and I try not to say anything because it makes me angry that we're back having this conversation in Halifax about street checks, something that is extreme, it's illegal, it violates our human rights, but yet we're looking for apologies from the police who had no intentions of apologizing, none whatsoever. So anyway, that was, let me stay in my lane. So the issues of, in terms of Black feminism, came to a head a couple of times for me, and it was mentioned in the bio that I was part of the National Action Committee on the Status of Women. And I remember being asked to be involved in the organization. We saw the organization at work. We recognized before, and I say we because there was three of us that said, we're not going by ourselves. If we're going, the three of us are going. That was myself, Joan Grant Cummings, and Lisa Kay. We had worked together at Women's Health and Women's Hands, a health center that's still in existence now, and it has its home history of activism and women's issues. And they asked us to come in, and so we were prepared to be in the movement because some of the same issues resonated for us, but we knew that our agenda was a little bit different, and we wanted that voice to be heard. Judy Rebick at that time was the president. I do believe that people know who Judy Rebick is. So anticipating some difficulty or some tension points, we got involved in the movement. But the turning point for us is when the next election came, and Judy Rebick was the president, and a South Asian woman was coming forward to be the next president. Her name was Sunira Tabani, who became president. But for us, the shocking conversation around the table was, is the country ready for a woman of color to be president of a national women's organization? And we almost fell to the floor. We were just like, what? For this question to come up on the floor amongst women, it was quite difficult for us to have. It was quite difficult for us to have a conversation at that particular time, but we did. And I remember that conversation was tough. People cried to the point where I developed the slogan, there's no crying during meetings. I can't, because I can't take care of this and have the conversation that I need to have. Not cruel about feelings and crying, but that was the reality. Because we had to be really clear about our intentions here. And if we were going to be in the movement, there had to be an understanding of what all the aspects of this means to us, how women show up. And we're not looking for equality with white men. We were looking for benchmarks for Black women. That was the issue that we had to hammer home in that particular situation. And so support so we were in the organization, so outside of that movement, we're, as I said, the Black Women's Collective, really strong women from all aspects of the gay and lesbian community, and that was also a learning point for me in terms of how to contextualize this, how to intellectualize this, and how to live this. So those were my experiences in Toronto, and also doing so that's from a national perspective. So on the ground, some of my work was working with, for a while I lived in Regent Park, and it was also recognizing the intersection between race and poverty and women's issues. And I began to organize with tenants associations in the recognition that the women who lived in housing were experiencing, a lot of them were on benefits or social services, as you would say, but experienced a lot of hypocrisy amongst, in terms of how they were treated, what their lives were like. If you were on benefits, those kind of stigmas that you experience. So a lot of organizing around that and recognizing, how that showed up for Black women as well. One of the other poignant things for me was Women's Health and Women's Hand. It's an organization that, is near and dear to me, and I've been home since '94, and that's still, at the heart of what I do. Myself and two other Black women were one of the original staff that was hired for the organization. And I remember that because they said they wanted to find out how all the women in Toronto, what this organization would look like. They had an idea of what it would look like, but they wanted us to go do the research and consultations and so on and so forth. So, and three of us, I have to say, were known in our various communities. One from South Africa, again, one from the Caribbean, and me from here. And we did the work, and I remember us being really excited about the report because, this is women from all over. This is women from Ethiopia, various kinds of, various African countries, etc. So we had a wealth of information to bring back to this board and say, here's what women want to see in terms of a health center. And I remember them reading the report saying, oh, you really did really good work, but, we'll call it thank you, and we'll let you know what happens. And so we're like, okay. So we're at home, and I remember we get this letter. When we worked on this for about 6 or 7 months, and we get this letter saying, thank you for all your hard work, but services are going to be put in abeyance until further notice. And I remember I thought, what the heck is abeyance? Someone sent your fathers.
Google that.
Yeah, Google.
That's right.
So I'm saying abeyance, what is it? So we quickly, unfortunately for them, we had worked really hard with a group, with a lot of women. And the women that we had consulted and talked to created the basis for a mass mobilization and organization and a sit-in of that health center. And we ended up negotiating with the Department of Health, the Ministry of Health, and those services were not put in abeyance, and that Women's Health Center is today one of the leading centers for women's health in Toronto. So I'm very proud of that work because, my son, rallies and sit-ins came to visit, so he's here to attest to that. So those were some of the things that kind of shaped the issue of Black feminism for me.
There's one question that I want to put out to the audience that I hope we'll get an answer to later. And to myself, I guess. And it's kind of like this. Individuals in our community and collections of individuals, Black women in Nova Scotia, have certainly engaged in promoting a feminist agenda. I mean, I think we just look at the work of Sylvia Hamilton, we look at the work of Congress of Black Women, Dolly Williams, even the work For the Moment has done, and so many other people. But there are too few examples in my mind. So I'm going to have to ask this question. I have to ask the question, how come we in Nova Scotia, Black women in Nova Scotia, did not create an actual organization or a movement specifically dedicated to the issues of our rights and equality as Black women? We tended to do them on the fringe of anti-racism, on the fringe of anti-poverty, on the fringe of a whole lot of other things, but never an organization of our own. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that we haven't done a lot, but we have, but I would posit that a great thing's been done, but I think that a lot of things that we assume are Black feminist work, I question. So, for instance, being a Black woman involved in community development is not necessarily Black feminist work. Because you could be involved in things that don't necessarily give agency to eliminating sexist oppression at all. Being the first black woman to do something that black men traditionally do is not necessarily black feminist work. Because you could just be taking on a role that men have done and just being an honorary man and participating in the same system, just the same as black people join the police force and still perpetuate the same kinds of things. It doesn't make you special. You're not giving agency to black people. So black women taking on roles that white women have had or white men have had or black men have had doesn't make you a feminist. That doesn't mean you're giving agency to our issues. Being a black woman who was leading an anti-racist struggle, is not necessarily black feminist work, because a lot of times we subordinate our issues as women to the issues of race. And we ought not have to. We ought to be able to live in our sense of life. Kimberly Crenshaw coined the term a long time ago in the 1970s, the term intersectionality. We all use it today in social science. I bet you a lot of the young people who use that in every paper they write don't know that a black woman coined that term, right? Don't even know it. Get out and sound intelligent. The intersectionality of everything. We all say that. No one knows that Kimberly Crenshaw, who is a legal scholar, a human rights expert and activist, etc., is the one, when she was actually litigating some cases that black women had brought forward about being discriminated against. And they were being discriminated against not just because they were women, but because they were black women. And so it was in that moment that she coined and created the theory of intersectionality. And so we subordinate our intersectionality a lot of times to the larger gender justice movement and to the larger anti-racist movement. So black women just forming groups that are based on profession or anything like that does not necessarily make us feminists. So I'm going to bring it to a close. I see the time is getting dry.
Okay.
So in my view, black feminism work involves intentional effort to eliminate gender-based oppression and discrimination, and it must be dedicated to dismantling systems and barriers, disrupting all these negative stereotypes that keep black women from enjoying full and equal participation, and shaping not just our lives, but helping to shape the rest of the world. And I don't believe there is any inherent contradiction between us being able to struggle with our brothers for race-based justice, or struggling with non-black sisters for gender justice work at all. And so I think that, but it still begs the question for me, why have we not created an organization of our own? I mean, are we that, altruistic? These are really important questions. And I'll just say that, in closing this, let me just say this. I think in terms of when you look at the black community, why we didn't go off and do that, I think because there's this shared narrative among black women and black men that black women have been historically mistreated and abused and neglected, and misrepresented and marginalized. And we agree, black men and black women agree that, our humanity has been, really trampled on by the larger society. And this shared history has led black women, I think, to the erroneous conclusion that all of our issues can be solved under the banner of anti-racist struggles with the support of black men, and we have shown that's not true. And this type of faulty reasoning also holds true for the issue of black women working under the banner of the larger guise of feminism and thinking that our issues will be dealt with. So I think black men have been with us, and that everyone, and they agree that everyone should treat us properly. That, black, white men, white women, they think everybody should give us equality except them. They didn't mean themselves in that equation. And white women, largely, because that's on top of the Nova Scotian context, which is a larger group, they will stand with us against sexism from black men. They will stand with us against sexism from white men. But they don't necessarily stand with us on issues of race. And sometimes they don't stand with us on issues of sexism either, because they too have internalized all of these stereotypes and archetypes of black women being, loud, angry, overbearing, sexually promiscuous, loudmouth, joke cracking, etc. So because they have internalized this, when we come forward and say, I've been treated bad as a woman, they will think to themselves, oh, maybe you brought that on yourself because you're a little bit aggressive, or you're way too sexy for my being. So these are the things. And so I don't really know the answer to why we haven't created an organization, given examples I've provided as to us not always being on the radar of the other two very obvious allies in our life. But at the end of it all, I would just say that hopefully we can have some discussion later on in terms of the definition that I've offered as to why this might be. Thank you.
Shelley's going to introduce our next artist.
Okay, I want to introduce this young, beautiful artist, Martha Mutali.
Good evening.
Good evening.
This first piece is called Tired Bodies. I am trying to remind myself why I am relevant, reciting daily mantras to keep feeding my soul. Black women need love too. Even though perfection may surface, self-hate rings a bell every single day. I'm learning to see myself. I'm learning to speak to my body, even when I am alone. Questioning why my inability to feel functional deserves an explanation. Why my journey to normalize blackness is burdensome. Black womanhood means survival. It's exhausting the way we live, taking home microaggressions that we never asked for. Self-care as a black woman means only being in spaces that make me feel great. I am tired of waking up to bullshit claims that racism doesn't exist. Reading story after story of black beings getting murdered because our flesh bothers you. Arrested for being black, napping while black, barbecuing in the park while black, graduating from university while black, breathing while black, making a phone call while black, caring for our children while black. Our stories have become a laughing matter to prevent the truth from being apparent. We are tired of being dead even before we get the chance to be alive. White people, as much as we see some of you try, you still fail. You fail miserably. And for the small fraction of white people who are aware of their privilege and work hard to navigate a world that's conditioned to giving them everything, you don't need to be applauded for your work. Just keep unlearning and listening. I'm tired of this poem being on my mind, but I wrote it as a step to freedom. Soon, and very soon, we will be free. This one's called Black Angels. I am tired of the stories of dead black girls whose voices don't matter. I am tired of feeling lifeless every time I read about another body found. Your death is a candle that shines every night, telling us you are still here, watching over us, hoping there aren't any more victims. Ignored by the news, mourned by the black community, protesting, protect us, black and blue. I want our community to see black women, to normalize our existence, to normalize our status, to normalize our voices, to acknowledge that blackness and womanhood have been under attack. It is not just white men trafficking us, even our own are complicit. Black fathers and uncles forget they come from black women. Black brothers and cousins and neighbors, we need you to protect us too. Black men who stay silent, you are not exempt. I am tired of existing in a world that denies my voice, feeling afraid that when I leave my house, I will be next. Another Tarana Burke, or Sandra Bland, or your sister, or your aunt, or your friend. Women whose names are not hashtags because of women like me, who see our ancestors as safe spaces. I'm tired of thinking about death, how flesh and bone are broken by hands built to protect us, how tears fall on the skin, staining our melanin, wondering who will dry our tears for us. Black girls, black women, black trans, black mothers, black daughters, black aunts, black sisters, blacks who are queer, blacks who are of mixed lineage, blacks in the diaspora, blacks in white spaces, blacks in black spaces. I lay awake at night, mind going through hoops. I occupy my brain seeking distractions from hopeful moments, desperately begging our community to stand up for us, asking our brothers, fathers, uncles, and friends to help us do the work. Stand up for us, defend us, learn to love us, stop silencing us. I close my eyes at night, praying that there will be no more stories, praying that there will be no more black angels, hoping that the struggle will end, because I am tired of pleading to the world to hear us, to see us, and to love us.
Age date either of us, but I remember Martha when she was doing her first poems down at Ginger's, which isn't open anymore. So that will give us some years that you could start adding up. But it's just great to see you A, still going, because so many black women lose their voices, and B, still being here. So thank you. But I'd like to introduce our final panelist, and then we'll have some time for questions. Dr. Lynn Jones is a community and labor activist and womanist, feminist, who grew up in Truro, Nova Scotia. From the time she was a child, she struggled against racism, sexism, and discrimination. She protested against the Vietnam and Nigerian Biafran War in university. Upon moving to Halifax, she advocated for better access to post-secondary education for Black and Indigenous students. Jones became a strong labor activist with the Public Servants Alliance of Canada, and then became the first person of color elected Vice President of the Canadian Labour Congress. Throughout her life, Lynn has been active in the pursuit of justice, working tirelessly for many causes and organizations that seek to eradicate racism, secure human rights, and achieve fair labor practices. She has been active in the environmental racism and justice movement and helped craft the first environmental racism bill in Canada. She presently chairs the Global African Congress Nova Scotia Chapter, a global organization who seeks reparations for the atrocities of the transatlantic slave trade, and I'm sure Lynn is walking around with the children's reparations.
I should have brought them inside. They're in the car.
Oh, in the car. So if you don't have your book created by children, the only children's book in the world of children talking about what reparations means to them, you should definitely hit Lynn up, and also thank you to Furman Press for publishing that. In 2016, she was awarded an honorary doctorate of humanities degree from Acadia University. It doesn't say this on here, but if you haven't been by the Lynn Jones archive at St. Mary's University, you should definitely check that out as an archive that Lynn curated from the age of 8 years old. So a real gold mine of community information. So please welcome Lynn Jones.
Good evening, everyone. Is this mic in the right place? I don't think so, but it's okay. You can hear me? Thank you so much. She's right here. I don't know what it feels like up there, but it's freezing up here. So, is there a window open back here or something? We're all cold.
Tell him to shut his check.
Will somebody just shut it?
Open the door in the back, just ask him to shut it.
Okay. Thank you. Oh, it's right up there. Yeah, let's trade places. First of all, let me thank the organizers so much for having this panel and inviting all of us us to share with each other on the topic of Black feminism. Shelley wants a clap.
When I asked Lynn if she would come and be a part of the panel, she sent me an email. She said, "Shelley, I can't say no to you."
So I thank you. Isn't it cold? I'm literally shivering. And I have the end of a cold to begin with, but that's okay. I have to tell you, I share from the depth of the bottom of my heart, that so many times when people ask me to be part of a panel or to speak or whatever, I am truly humbled, and that is the truth. I'm like, why would you want to hear this story? Why do you want to hear from me? And I've told different things so many times. You must be tired of it. So it's such a privilege, it really is. And then when I walk into a wonderful forum, such as this forum, and I meet so many friends and acquaintances and people that I've networked with and protested with, and people that I've yet to meet, but I'm going to look forward to meeting even this evening. And then I think, okay, Lynn, it's okay, because they're all doing the same kinds of things that I'm doing, and we're each learning from each other, growing from each other, and if we didn't get together collectively, we would be doomed to keep repeating the same errors and mistakes and not develop and change this world. So thank you for being here to help to change the world, and I hope that whatever I can share with you, somehow or the other, will help to move you to action, as I'm sure the rest of the panel would feel the same way about. That's another problem that I have, is that are we doing these panels, are we speaking in vain? Like, why are we doing it? Are we just doing it to hear each other? I don't think so. I think we're here because when we were looking for something, we're looking somehow or the other of what kind of action, because that's really what feminism is all about. In the final analysis, we're changing systems, the political systems, economic systems, what have you, whether for women or other, because we want to institute change. So if you're here this evening listening to this panel and what we're us sharing our experience, think in your mind about how you can use what we've shared in the work that you're doing to change the world. So that's where I start from. Being last speaker on the panel has its advantages, because you can steal. You'll see me with all these little bits of paper. I said, I'm going to talk about to people tonight. I don't know. I grabbed some different papers, and Carolanne can attest to this. And I figured I'd pull something along the way that you would be interested in. But even when they gave me the topic, I guess I was a bit taken back by the terminology. And that is the terminology of Black feminism, that terminology. And I also think sometimes my mind doesn't work like everybody else's. It's always somewhere else and pulling out something that somebody else is not doing, but I'm going to tell you about it anyway, okay? It's like we're feminists, and we need to claim that terminology. The work we've done is feminism in the work. We happen to be Black in doing that work. So I don't view it as Black feminism. I view it as feminism, because that's the definition. And as African people, we are doing certain things in certain ways that may be not the same as, for example, white people are doing it. But we're feminists, that's it. And from there, that's in my concept. The next thing, sometimes people don't like me. You just have to deal with it. I like me. So to me, that's the most important part of the whole issue. And I wasn't going to start from here, but it's because I'm the last speaker that I will. And I'm going to talk about other women, because we're talking about women, eh? And I wanted to start from two places, and I'll get into that. And the first thing I want to talk about is that being a feminist as a black person or African person has not been easy. And it's not been easy for all the people that have been doing feminism work. There's been a lot of hurt, there's been a lot of pain, there's been a lot of resources, untold miseries, all kinds of those negative kinds of things. And where I'm going is that in the work that I've done on activism, because I view myself more from the activism perspective, is that white women have been very cruel to us. Extremely cruel. And that's why you might walk out the door and you don't like me. That's okay. Because in our experience, or in my experience, ours, and I can say ours, our experience, you've been very cruel. And I'll try to do some of my own personal examples in terms of that cruelty. I'm going to jump that for a little bit, and I'm going to go back to that terminology of feminism. How can we not call it feminism when we all originated from the ultimate of feminism, which is Africa? And you talk about Mother Africa, which is the original place of feminism, and the whole concept of women challenging all those different systems that we talk about. So the original feminism started in Africa. I remember in doing, and I'll probably go a lot to the labor experience, even though that was a lot of my time, but really if you add it up, probably the community things took up more of my time. But I remember being in the trade union movement, and I'm bouncing off of Carolanne, who talked about women crying, and crying in the movement, working with women on issues, and she's right, people crying all over the place. Every little thing, in my day, it was when women were asking to be called women, but they were being called girls, Robert. They were being called girls, and the women didn't want to be called girls anymore. They wanted to be called women. So they were trying to train the other men, the white men, but mostly the men weren't grabbing it. And, why wouldn't you want to be called a lady or whatever? Why do you want to be called a woman? And when the men kept insisting they would stay there, these women started crying. These white women were crying all over the place. And I'm like, why are they crying? Like, you know? And I would say, well, why aren't these men not getting it? Call people whatever they want to be called. And as black women, we were used to being called out of our name because we got the N-word, we got all kinds of different words, as did other people of color and Aboriginal women. But you call people what they ask me. You want to be called a woman? We'll call you a woman. That's a big deal. But it ended up that I started to about myself. And you do that because when you're operating in those systems all the time, where you don't have often your other people of color, sisters or whatever, they're with you, you can lose perspective. And I'm like, maybe I'm not getting something. Like, why am I feeling different? Why am I acting this way? And there was an African woman, and I'll call her name because Delvina talked about mentorship. Her name, well, she was a Nigerian woman by the name of Nkiru Nzegu, who is now Dr. Nkiru Nzegu at the State University of New York. And she took me aside and she said, Lynn, of course you see things from a different perspective because you still have parts of your African ancestry in your blood. And part of your African ancestry in that blood says this. So she was training me in my cultural grounding. And I can still remember that, and that's like 40 years or whatever so today, and I can still remember the feeling of having the opportunity to be having missed out on what my African grounding as a woman was. It was also her who taught me about how women in Africa, when white people viewed the role of women, they viewed, and the colonists viewed them as being in very subservient roles, and that the men were in the head of the household period, and the men were the ones that determined things. And the colonists thought that too, that because the men were the ones that they thought they were negotiating with, that the women had no role. When in actual fact, the men weren't acting without going first to the Women's Council to find out what they could say and what they couldn't say and what they could do and what they couldn't do. And in Carol Nzegu, in telling me about when the men started not adhering to that Women's Council, how the women in Nigeria waged a war, a real blown, full-body war. Can you imagine this? But you would have thought with that war that they used guns and rifles against the men when they were allowing Africa to get chopped up and taken by others, but they didn't use that. Anybody have any idea about what they used to wage the war? Their bodies. So they withdrew all of the services and what have you, and they initially did win the war, but over time they were overpowered. But anyway, I share that with you as a grounding that as African women in feminism, that our feminism comes from our original roots, and that has been what we've been able to allow us to survive. I want to go next. I gotta go talk fast. I'm a slow talker.
You've been talking about David.
You're interesting.
I want to go next to because I'm the last speaker, and I got to go off somebody else who brought in the biblical context. So I get now to move into a biblical context, which I actually had before, so I'm not completely stealing off the previous speaker, because you can see I have this written because it means a lot to me too, my biblical context. Now, Sister Afua, who I love dearly, mentioned about it being Ramadan and what have you. I'm going to share with you from a Christian perspective. Not because you all have to be Christians, and I'm not trying to convert you, but this evening. But I do want to tell you a passage. I was asked to speak in church once, and I love this because it came to mind when you talked about women. I didn't know this passage in the Bible until I was asked to speak. It was taken from Jeremiah 9:20, and some of you may not be familiar with it. If not, it'd be worthwhile to go to it. Jeremiah 9:20. Here's what it says. Now women, Hear the word of the Lord. Open your ears to the word of his mouth. Teach your daughters how to wail. Teach one another a lament. You said, well, what's that all about, Lynn? Don't mean nothing to me. Well, God in this particular point had called on people to change and repent. He wanted them to recapture their values and their heritage. So I connect this to feminism, is that we want to recapture our women's values and the heritage of women. So they called on what they called the wailing women to come and to send for the most skillful of them. So the women that were skilled in wailing. Not only that, but he wanted them to come quickly, urgently. The women were required urgently. So it was that verse in 20. Teach your daughters how to wail too. They were professionals. They wanted to train the younger women, right? Act like you're in church. Okay? Yeah, exactly. So God was calling not the men, but the women. The highest power of all is calling the women to do what needs to get done. So they're calling on these women that they have the ultimate responsibility to change. No, it's not the men, it's the women. So the question for me was, if I find another piece of paper now. There's only about 20 pieces of paper.
Pastor goes like
it's somehow or the other is that if we're going to have this political, economic, social, feminist change, that the women have a big role in making that happen. Now, they talked about youth tonight, and that Elle was supposed to be a youth here in the future. Now, I'm hearing when it comes, there's a lot of women out there, as they stated, they're doing a lot of political activism. They're doing, is that right, Masama? They're doing a lot of change. They're involved in all these different protests and what have you. But the youth are getting to me right now, I have to tell you. I'm not pleased. And the area I'm not pleased because I've been very careful with the youth to really commend them for the work that they're doing, have I not? And how they're organized in ways that we didn't organize with social media and environmental racism, women's issue, of the intersectionality issues, the youth.
Just over everybody.
The youth are doing it. But I can piggyback. But there's this concept out there that the youth are now saying that the elders, older people, need to get out the way. Has anybody else heard it? Yeah. That they somehow or the other need to get out the way and make room for the youth. Well, I got a problem with that. And my problem is that nobody's stopping you from wailing. Nobody's stopping you from doing what needs to get done and the social activism and the change. We're not blocking the path. So it's, if that work and the feminism's work and the work of the women now needs to get done, then let the youth rise up, right? Let them rise up and do the work, but we can work collectively. And that's the only way we're going to get the job done. And I'll go back to trade union movement, because trade unionists over there and what have you, is that they tell me that The difference in trying to organize is that when we came from Africa as Black women, we were used to working in family networks and communal kind of networks. Then came slavery, and they messed us all up, trying to split us up and break up our families and what have you. But lo and behold, even so through being enslaved, we still ended up creating families that weren't necessarily biological, but at the same time, we still managed to go back to work in the collective. And so it didn't die. And we somehow or the other have to make sure that from this generation that we keep that collectivity going. And part of that collectivity is also working with others and networking with each other. Now I need to get back to the cruel white women. I'll give you some examples in all seriousness, and there's many of them, but I'll give you some and I'll tell you how it can also get turned around. I remember quite vividly, I'll never forget, when I was running for a national office in one of the largest public service unions. Some of you may have heard of this before. And it was Canada Employment and Immigration Union. And it was a women's position that I was running for as a national officer. And as I hadn't run at that level before, tried to seek office, and there was no incumbent in the position, so I thought, oh, this is a great opportunity. So I lobbied for the position. Before the election took place, there was, even though before that, the women in the movement, the white women, had said that, oh yeah, we want diversity and we want to be inclusive, but somebody on the panel mentioned earlier, as long as you don't take certain positions, you're okay, stay in your place. But if you get out of your place, watch out. So I guess I was out of my place. So they lobbied, and before the election, they put a communique under every delegate's door. And the communique said, basically, vote for, you need to vote for, because there were other white women running, people that are truly representative of the membership, and that, in other words, a black person is not, because there weren't many that were active in this forum. I was the only one. And so therefore, I could not represent the women in that forum. And that was put under every delegate's door just before the election. Well, unbeknownst to them, up to that point in time, I was just running for the experience. I'll tell you the end of the story. I became the first black woman ever to hold that national office. Okay. Yeah, for sure. I'm not going to keep going because I have like 10 million stories. One more story. One more story. Okay, one more story. Who do you want me to pick on next? More white women stories? You guys were really cruel. Did I tell you? It was really, really cruel. I won't forget, I was at I'll do another union because you people. one short and another one, because I'm doing mostly union, and union wasn't my full experience. But particularly because there were so many people that I worked with in the union movement at a time when black women weren't as active, but we brought them in over time through lobbying and organizing, which is another story of how we got black women involved in the trade union movement. But I can still remember my first first national executive meeting. And we had a women's caucus, so I was the only black woman in the national caucus. And I don't remember it quite, but I have the transcripts. The women wanted something for women. You can be guaranteed it wasn't too much about black women, but I'm alone. I'm there, supportive. And so in our caucus, we were lobbying for something for women. This was at my first national meeting where I'm in the caucus with them, and I don't know how this thing functions at the national level. So then you have to go in with the men for the overall meeting. So we go over to the overall meeting, and we're trying to get whatever women's issue it was on the table. So we go into and we all agreed that, okay, we're supportive, we go in. I get at the meeting, and by now you're hearing other voices, other opinions, including the men's opinion of what needed to happen. And I think that what you're supposed to do is, that's why you're there. You listen to the debate, and that helps you to know which side of the debate that you will end up going on. So once I'm hearing the debate, I recognize that in actual fact, the position that the Women's Caucus had taken was detrimental to women of color. But I didn't know that in the caucus meeting. But once I get out in the overall meeting, are you with me? I get in the overall meeting and I realize this is detrimental. I can't support what, even though in the Women's Caucus, I thought I could. But I'm here in the debate. So it comes time for the vote, and I think, okay, I've heard the debate. I can't vote that way. I got to vote this way because I got to look out for my people. Wow! Did I get the wrath of the white women? I was totally what's the word? Ostracized, left out of the circle, not included. Literally, it took time to get back. Back in because I needed that network to do the work that I wanted to get done. I needed that network. So you had to actually work to get back in that network. I will never forget that meeting. Never, ever, ever. And how you're treated and how it's enough for anybody to pack up and go back home again. Actually, I was glad to go back to get back home. So it's cruel. It's cruel because our issues always came after everybody else's issues. After we get our issues, Lynn, then maybe we can get black women into the foray. And that's my last thing, absolute last, because I was going to do another community, but I'm going to do Sanera, because you mentioned Sanera at that.
Yeah. You told my story.
Yeah, I know, that's what I'm supposed to do. Because Sanera Tabing, I just love her, Asian woman from Vancouver. She, as Carolanne said, she just got elected at this time as the president of the National Action Committee. Happened that their convention was in Saskatchewan, and it was right across the street from the National Canadian Labour Congress conference, right across the street. So the people that were supporting Sonera, the Judy Rebicks and had come over, and Nancy Rich, any of you that know those names and what have you, they all thought that, well, we'll go over to the Canadian Labour Congress and introduce this woman of color to the Canadian Labour Congress women. When they came over, by then I'm on the Canadian Labour Congress, I had just finished and was nearing the end of a speech that had to do with the marginalization of women of color. Because at the Canadian Labour Congress convention, all the caucuses had funding except for, guess who? Right? So we didn't get any funding, everybody else did. So they had their meetings with food, and you know we like to eat. There was no food for people of color at the caucus meetings or anything like that. But I called it over the podium, I named it over the podium, and the privilege that was in that room and how we didn't receive it. Just as they were bringing Sonera in to introduce her, the women in the room attacked me, particularly the white women, and the black women, the few people of color, women, the ones that were there, were too scared, quite frankly, to go to the mics and protect me. So I had no protection. I was kind of like both there alone. Sonera never even got a chance to get introduced. She didn't get a chance. Because when she came in that room and saw what was happening, now this was a woman of color, she wasn't a black woman, but a woman of color, but she knew exactly what was taking place, and she had just become president. She also needed the support of the Canadian Labour Congress for her funding on that, but she goes on the mics immediately. She runs to the mic. She's not a delegate. She goes on the mics and calls the conference vote for what they were doing and what was taking place. I'll never forget her for it in that conference. So in the end, there was good results. I haven't told you all the good results and the good things about those women that were so cruel. Is that, for example, out of that scenario thing, we developed a policy and statement out of that conference that recognized white privilege and what have you, that they probably still use to this day. Over time, I'd like to say about those other women is that over time, you know, some of my best friends are white. And networks and friendships and what have you, over time, we wouldn't be able to do what we've been able to do in terms of the feminist movement. So thank you.
Let me do this poem real quick. It's a funny context, I have to just tell you real quick, because like the only time I ever get at whatever the table is when some black woman who has a job like lets me come in. So this was for, otherwise it's like I'd rather burn down my building. So this was in front of council, which is the lawyers that govern the lawyers. And then there was these other black people supposed to be coming in, and I was so scared no black people come in, and I looked like mad inappropriate. But thankfully the black people showed up at the last minute. Many of my brothers gone away in a box. So many, many lives measured out in ticking clocks. All our black fingers are sore from picking locks, while the rich all invest in rising prison stocks, and the rich all invest in those taser stocks. Young black man dead on the street from electrical shocks. Same company makes the body cameras they sell to the cops. When they make a killing, we pay the cops. Our police force purchase a tank for a rapid response. Infiltrate our communities with agents and ops. There's cameras on the corner of the vacant lot. No grocery store, but there's a place that grooms dogs. No school anymore, but the donuts are hot. Count yourself lucky if you have a sidewalk. Only real estate you call your own is your own grave plot. Sold a deed to your land while your grandmother sobs. No subsidized daycare for the tots. Mold and rot in the housing like you live in a squat. Government can't invest money in shelter cots, but they offered a tax break to Amazon. Soon they'll give your job to a white robot. Criminal record checks so your resume's dropped. No amnesty for black folks when they legalize pot. Trudeau said he smoked, but he never got caught.
Now we've got 4 times the cannabis arrests in the Wortley report. 1/3 of black men with a charge in the court. Systematic racism so you can't get a shot. Human rights complaints against fire, transit, and cops. Working at Leon's a noose tied in a knot. Shopping at Sobeys cashier is calling her boss. It looks like you on the tape. You're that blurry blonde. North Preston address, so your resume's gone. Sounds like a black name, so it doesn't belong. Restaurant 5, you for natural hair done up in locks. No security clearance to work on the docks. No options but guns, hustlings or rocks. Half of the jail just needs detox. Most of the rest just need a therapist or someone to talk. Childhood trauma that goes unresolved. What you get is a tray pushed through a slot. All you get is some prayers and handed over to God. They say it's just Trump. They say it's just it. As if Canada ever welcomed you if your skin is like chocolate. As if we are down here at the bottom making their profit. Living nanny from Jamaica watching their child round the clock. Blueberry picking modern day slave crops. They did a poll if too many immigrants go to a mosque. Are there too many immigrants not of old Canadian stock? They call you illegal once there's a border you cross. Crammed into container ships and trucks like livestock. Kids in a cage made the world pretend to be shocked, but indefinite immigration detention is something we've got. Tents at the border of Haitians without the Red Cross. Black man is snow to his chest with his fingers lost. Like those starlight tours in the cold and the frost were worth more to them dead, or more to them dropped, or worth more in a cell in a prison shop. $2 a day in those prison jobs. Got them dishing out food or pushing a mop. An American company profits when you call your mom or your pops. Paid lawyers got a suit from Hugo Boss. If you don't teach them to read, then they'll be in the dock while those small towns get prisons to replace the fish and the logs. The correctional college is opening a record number of spots. Just like back in the day they auctioned us off. Just like back in the day they chased us down with the dogs. Just like back in the day they built our communities on rocks. They say earn your way out the hood like the rappers and jocks. They only give you a mural if you get shot. Got us trapped on the streets in the school of hard knocks. They're preparing the outline of our bodies in chalk. They say they won't apologize for police stops. They're consulting with black folk like we're just their props. We can't breathe because they follow us when we walk. Security guards stalking our mothers in the shops. They say slavery's over like we ever forgot when we're still at the bottom and they're at the top. This colonial province named for the new Scots. School to prison pipeline connecting the dots. White people in ads make you wish to be someone you're not. Skin bleaching cream got your face come out and blotch. Life sentence got you buried under prison block. Cruise around the world. Drones would always drop. Bombing campaigns from Israel to Iraq. Global white supremacy never ever stops. Prison industrial complex always on the clock. Black life on a timer. Tick, tick, tock. So too many of my brothers gone away in a box.
I just want to thank all the panelists again. I'm just overjoyed with the stories. There's so many, as Lynn said. I mean, I chose to do this because I felt the feminist narrative has forgotten us. We worked, we protested, we stood in the wind and the rain, we were on the gender equity committees, we were on the wage equality committees, we were always there when the feminist movement needed us. But after that, we were forgotten. And so these are stories, these are our experiences. We were a part of the feminist movement as much as any white woman was. So I just wanted to tell you that.
So we do have time for questions if people